Ladies and gentlemen, let's Gaming video. AMD are going to be aggressively updating their entire graphics lineup over the next coming quarters, and so we should see 16/17 nm Arctic Island GPUs arriving in 2016, pushing out the current generation of graphics cards, for example the R9 390. All of these are comments from AMD's president/CEO Lisa Su. Now, she has said that AMD have made some good progress in growing their share of traditional GPUs. So in other words, once again, that would be discrete GPUs, the ones that you plug into your PCIe slot. But she now wants to take part in what she considers to be key steps as a longer term strategy focus for AMD at delivering what they consider to be great products, driving deeper customer relations and simplifying their business. Highlights include delivering strong double-digit sequential revenue growth in each of our business segments, expanding our portfolio with introduction of several new APUs and GPUs that will improve competitive position in key markets, forming the Radeon Technologies Group to bring a vertical focus to our graphics business and help strengthen performance in traditional graphics markets, while simultaneously establishing leadership initiatives in emerging immersive computer markets like virtual and augmented reality. So you're probably having your head spin from various technical terms, but probably primarily from the marketing spin, because, well, there's a lot of it. But the biggest ones you can take away from all of that are AMD need more money. AMD going to get more money by focusing on APUs and GPUs in terms of the graphics technology. That's what they feel. Gaming is going to be augmented, if you will, if you excuse, with virtual/augmented reality. And of course, they're going to be forming a new initiative. I guess you could call it almost ATI 2.0, which is going to be the Radeon Technologies Group, which have more autonomy, and they can basically focus on saying, hey, this is what we need to do. Now, the real crux of the matter, I'm sure most of you would agree, are the next generation of GPUs, because AMD have been on what is essentially the same GCN process for some time now. They've got some mileage out of it. Just for the sake of argument, the 7970, just for example, has evolved quite considerably to now become the, let's say, the R9 390X or even the Fury. And indeed, the Fiji Silicon has quite a lot of differences. There are, for example, better color compression technologies in there. Obviously, there's a hell of a lot of extra shaders and extra ROPs. There's been some changes to the caching and other bits and bobs which have improved the overall performance of the GPU. But while, yes, tessellation, for example, has improved, they've bumped up the number of ACEs in there, which are obviously asynchronous compute engines, which help to distribute compute workload in between graphics bubbles, in other words, in time slices where the GPU isn't rendering or processing graphics workloads. All of that has definitely been improved over iterations of the GCN architecture. And unofficially, I guess you could say that we've moved from GCN 1.0 to 1.1 to 1.2 and so on, but we are now kind of getting a bit long in the tooth with the old GCN architecture as it is. So what we need is GCN 2.0, which is going to come to us from Arctic Islands. Nvidia, of course, already have Maxwell, and AMD tried to counter somewhat with the 390s, just for the sake of argument, but let's just be honest here, they are effectively facing a cooler, more refined version of Kepler, which moved into Maxwell, and obviously there were some changes in Maxwell, for example, improvements in, once again, color compression. They certainly moved to a more streamlined, focused GPU. They have less compute performance, for example, which is evident in their Titan lineup. But now AMD, of course, for the next year, they can definitely come at Nvidia with a much more, I guess, even playing field. This would be the fairest way to say it. So the first way they're going to do that with the next GPUs, as I discussed just a while back, is they are going to be delivering twice the performance per watt that they currently have with their offerings. This is based on multiple different reasons, for example architecture improvements as well as advancements in FinFET process technology. Once again, it's going to be 16 or possibly 14 nm depending on the GPU / how it goes, but overall there have been a few issues which have actually held AMD back. Some of which is their fault, some of which is less their fault. For example, yes, Fury definitely had a bit of whine to it, quite literally, when it came to the pump. And some of these issues were ironed out, but they were present and probably did annoy some people. I feel the big issue that they've had, however, is definitely their supply. And sometimes their supply was low, particularly when the GPUs first came out. And it just so happened, of course, that Nvidia at the time, you know, you had the 980 which was running rampant, you had the Titan, the 980 Ti of course is now out as well, or has been out for some time. So you've got this issue where people just thought, oh, bollocks to it, I can't keep waiting for, you know, to build my new rig, I'm just going to go with Nvidia because I can't keep waiting. And in some cases people were waiting for some time, and there was also a lot of course, as you would expect, price gouging, which is never fun, and it's an issue which is naturally affecting, let's say, Skylake at the moment as well. For example, the 6700K, which obviously has nothing to do with GPUs, but even so, I mean, the price over the last couple of weeks has just skyrocketed. It's like over 400 Great British pounds, which is absolutely ludicrous, but there you go. The only reason I keep going, however, and I'll point this out now, the only reason I keep saying 14 or 16 nm dependent on the GPU / what happens is because, quite honestly, AMD are being a bit sketchy on your details when it comes to the actual final design. They have said, they've admitted that they are obviously moving towards a new FinFET process. They have, once again, admitted that it's going to be a lot more efficient. We know that it's got to be either 16 or 14 based on their claims. Unfortunately, they've not gone on record and said, well, here's what we're doing, which is unfortunate. There's a good possibility it could be Global Foundries, there's a good possibility it could be TSMC, but we just don't know at the moment. There's been no clarification, which is a little bit frustrating, but unfortunately there you go. So AMD do have a bit of a thing when it comes to isles or islands. Southern Islands, which was released back in 2012, which of course the flagship was Tahiti, for example, the 7970s, you had the 7950s, which sported 3GB of RAM. This is just an indication of how much performance we're starting to jump. That had 264GB per second bandwidth. Volcanic Islands, which was of course Hawaii, also known as R9 390X, it naturally increased the amount of memory to 4GB. Bandwidth scaled up with as well, 320. But if you do a bit of experimentation, if you happen to have, let's say, a 290X, doesn't work with the 390s because you've got different amounts of memory bandwidth. But if you do have a 290X, which obviously we do as a tester, if you do the old overclocking with it, you'll actually notice in a lot of games it's definite that it is bandwidth constrained, which is something they did fix, of course, with the Furies, which was based once again on Fiji. I say once again because I already mentioned that. So we're moving from volcanic islands, from Hawaii to pirate islands / Caribbean islands, and that, of course, because it was using high bandwidth memory 1, it had the limitation of 4GB, which we know about, 512GB per second of bandwidth, which is pretty damn insane. But Arctic Islands, which is Greenland, that's the high-end part, that, as I mentioned, is going to be released next year. We don't know the amount of memory. Supposedly, it's either going to be 8GB to 16GB. That's what Nvidia are touting as well for their GPUs. In fact, they're saying for the very high-end cards, they could actually go up to 32GB, but for the regular consumer-facing cards, it's going to be 16GB at max. So for Nvidia's GPUs, next generation, Pascal, from what we understand, we're going to be looking at 16GB for the equivalent of the 980 Ti, for the sake of argument. But regardless, both cards will be sporting 1 terabyte per second of bandwidth. Finally, AMD of course cannot come out and speak about the NX because of, well, reasons. You know, they're under probably more NDA weight than, you know, it's to say that they'd probably get absolutely sued to oblivion if they mentioned anything about the NX at this stage. But they have admitted, or there are a lot of evidence, there's a lot of evidence that they are not only providing Apple with its own socks, but, and some of those, for example, are going to be for the iMac in 2017-18, but they will also be providing the chips for the NX as well. And these have come from multiple industry whispers, even before Lisa Su did admit that they did have gaming designs in the pipeline, and these were not just the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, which obviously otherwise she wouldn't say, you know, obviously I'm putting somewhat words in her mouth, but saying that, you know, they are working on other, you know, hardware. It's probable, therefore, that it will be a semi-custom design. They're probably not going to pull something off the shelf. That's what both Microsoft and Sony did for the their respective consoles. Of course, they did do quite a lot of tweaking. With Sony, for the sake of argument, they pushed into a lot of compute technology in there. They bumped up the number of asynchronous shaders. They added volatile bit. They ensured it was GDDR5 and all of that jazz. With Microsoft, they went the ESRAM route and whatever else they did. So what Nintendo were going to do, we just don't know. I mean, some people are still assuming it could be ARM-based. Some people are still saying it could possibly be another company. But I think the signs are pointing to a semi-custom based next-generation APU from AMD. What that is based upon, I do not know. They have announced quite a few over the last couple of weeks, or rather over the last couple of months, of what it could potentially be. NX is at the moment rumoured for 2016 holiday. I don't know if that will actually finally be. It could be even March 2017 for the sake of argument. But the chips are supposedly going to be industry leading, incredibly powerful. I don't honestly know. I've had a couple of people write to me and say, well, do you actually really think that Nintendo are going to have that much of a leap over Sony? Or are they really going to be, like, you know, behind the Xbox, for example? And my opinion at this stage, 3 years into the future, with the FinFET process reductions that AMD are undergoing right now, obviously they're moving to 16 or 14 nm, whatever the hell it ends up being, with the ludicrous amount of shaders that the next generation GPUs have, with the improvements to the various CPUs. For example, it could be a Zen-based CPU, which ends up being inside the NX. It really could be. You scoff, but the timing would make sense. At the very least, it will be an evolution of the Jaguar architecture, so it would have an improved amount of IPC. I don't think it'll have additional cores. I think they'll stick with the same, maybe 8 cores-ish design. In fact, technically, it could even go theoretically with fewer cores if there's less system overhead, but I imagine Nintendo will probably stick with a fairly high overhead, just because they probably will want to at least start pushing some of the services that Sony and Microsoft did. That's just a guess. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'm going to get going, so take care of yourselves, and if you can do the like and share everything. And I just accidentally knocked my cup halfway across the desk, which was a massive fail. I will see you soon, so take care of yourselves. Bye for now.